Today, let's get to listen to stories of triumph amidst failures, courage despite fear, strength through weakness, and even the occasional hopeful cheer from personal punny experiences. I am your host, RKaye, and this is the BetterU podcast. What is up, fam? Welcome to today's episode of the BetterU podcast. Coach RKaye here today, and I would like to thank you for joining me for today's show. And as you probably can see, we're in a bit of a different angle today. I'm trying to use a bit of natural light, but it seems it's, doing a little weird thing through our window, so I just really had to move our angle for today's show. So anyway, with that set aside, all right, we are again doing one of our frequently asked questions, or some of the most common questions that you would probably encounter when you start off your fitness journey, or when you come back off a long time off from your fitness journey. So today's little question or little problem that we need to resolve is how long we should be doing our training, or how long we should be exercising, pretty much. All right. And so oftentimes, traditionally, many people would think or would associate being at the gym or having to train or having to exercise. Many people still associate it with having to make sure that you're in a facility or in a gym at least for an hour, right? That is traditionally something that many of us would normally say, like, oh, I need an hour. I need to set an entire hour to be able to train, to be able to exercise. And I am not saying that that isn't true, all right? All I'm saying is this question, or the answer to this question, would always come back to your own lifestyle or what would be available to you. So me as a trainer, if I have a client and my client would ask me, how long do we need to train? I wouldn't normally say, oh, we need an entire hour. You need to block off an entire hour from your schedule. Of course, one of the main things that I would need for my client to understand is if they have a very busy schedule, which normally many of my clients would actually have a very busy schedule, what would normally be a setup for many of them is to ensure that even if they do not have an entire hour blocked out in their training day, or when they train with me, they have to make sure to also have alternative ways to incorporate a training program. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes, if you do not really have about an hour in your schedule to quote unquote burn for your training, normally we would often, I myself included, we would normally let you guys know that it's best if you can cut short your training, but you would have to do it more frequently. All right. So we'll get into a bit more details when it comes to that. But oftentimes, if you want or you are comfortable with an entire hour of a training schedule each week, that would normally be in an equation, all right? So if you have an entire hour to spare, that entire hour is spent really mainly focusing on your entire workout routine, full hour, okay? And you get to maximize that full hour. Oftentimes, that would be associated with at least training for 3 to 4 times each week. All right, that is your training frequency. Now, if you are the type of person who's very busy, maybe you only have like 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes max in your day to train, that's when we need to ensure that you have a lot more training sessions. So that would normally equate to maybe having to train at least 4 to 5, sometimes even you have to train daily. All right. And studies have shown that a lot of people, whether they do an hour's worth of training or 10, 15 minutes of training, but they do it in the frequency that I just mentioned, those would still be very effective and ensure that progress is made throughout the fitness journey or throughout the entire process of wanting to reach for a certain goal or ensuring that results happen. All right. Now, to go back to having to or wanting to know how long you have to train, oftentimes, again, there is just those recommendations that I've mentioned. But of course, there will also be certain adjustments that you can do and other types of ways to adapt to a very busy schedule is to actually split out your workout, okay, or split out your routine. Now, let's say that you have a very packed schedule, all right, but let's say you have a tad bit of time in the morning and a little bit more at the end of the day or as you end your day, all right? What you can do if you are really keen on sticking to your training routine, you could, let's say, split out your 1 hour routine to 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the evening or in the afternoon, all right? That's also another technique or another trick for you to be able to sufficiently be able to train as consistently as you can without having to deal with having to figure out what times in the day you have to train. All right. Does it also go the same for, let's say, if you do 15 or 20-minute training routines? Yes, that could also work out. But again, when you do shorten your training sessions, you have to really become a lot more frequent when you do it, because the shorter amount of time often means that you only get to do like a few moves, a few drills. And yeah, with shorter amounts of time when you train, you don't really get to do as much of an exercise routine. Maybe 5, 6 exercises max, all right? But if you do an entire hour of training, you get to do a lot more mobility work, flexibility work. You do your warm-up, your cool down. You don't necessarily have to incorporate it in a short amount of time. So technically you have a lot more of the routine or a lot more to finish when you do an hour's worth of training. So that's one of the reasons why you really have to do a lot more training sessions in a week if you stick with 10-15 minute increments of training time. All right. So again, the question or the answer to this question would always be reliant on your own lifestyle, on how you have time to train. All right. Now, there's always, of course, a lot of pressure for people to have training times. All right. And sometimes you do not really have that time in the day All right, so that's also applicable to when you have training times that you cannot really attend to. So let's say you have a very busy day, maybe you skip out on training today. You can also freely, I would suggest, as a coach and as a trainer, you can also freely pick off of those types of training durations. All right, you don't necessarily need to be very strict that, oh, I do an hour's worth of training, and I do it 3-4 times each week. You don't necessarily need to stick with just that 1 hour of training and have it like 3-4 times a week. All right, if you have a very busy day and that fourth day in your week you really only had like 10-15 minutes, go ahead and do that. It's just making sure that you still stick with your plan to have that training for the day. Don't feel bad that you had your 1 hour training routine cut short. All right, it's also the same or vice versa for short duration training sessions. All right, I know if you get to be very used to short duration training sessions, sometimes your body will adapt to just that short training session. And when you push yourself to do an hour's worth, either you get overly tired already, or you kind of find yourself a little bit more maybe exhausted, or maybe a little bit confused why you're even doing an entire hour of a training routine. But that is actually a very good way to also make sure that when you stick to your training routine, your body doesn't easily plateau when it comes to your training progress. All right, it's a good way not just to deal with your training schedule, it's also a good way for you to adapt and make sure that your training will consistently be progressive and that your body doesn't easily adapt to the training routine that you set. All right, because again, as I've mentioned, a lot of times our body does tend to adapt, especially if you stick to a certain program. So let's say you've been doing that entire 1 hour duration program for 2-3 months, 4 months, 5 months. Sometimes your body is very well adapted already, so it doesn't get to level up or progress as much as you wanted. So what you can do is you shift from an hour's worth or 1 hour duration training sessions. You can cut it short, use your program and cut it into 2, into 3, and then spread it out throughout your week, maybe throughout your day if you want. Those are the many tricks that you can actually do with your own routine, and just make sure that you stay consistent, that you stay within the time and the schedule that you always want to stick to. All right, guys. So again, if you are always trying to bug yourself about, oh, I have to train an hour, it doesn't have to be a straight hour of training. All right, you can always cut it through and make sure that it will adapt to your own lifestyle, into your own schedule. All right, it doesn't make sense for you to stress out and tell yourself that, oh, I can only train for an hour and I have to make sure I have that hour in a very, very busy and packed day. All right, doesn't make sense. Don't stress yourself out. Just make sure that you are able to stick with your routine, stick with staying consistent, but be sure to also be accepting and flexible about it. And just be wary and don't stress yourself out too much that you need to go at it in an hour, okay? That doesn't need to be the thing. And don't be scared that you won't be able to get the results that you need, because if you are able to stay physically active and stay consistent and just make sure to commit yourself to ensuring that you move as much as you can, everything will be okay. All right, guys. So that is it for today's episode. All right. Just had to think of that. Okay. That is it for today's show, everybody. Thank you so much again for joining me in today's episode. Are a little different angled episode. All right. Thank you so much. And if you guys are still or haven't subscribed to the channel, please do hit that subscribe button because it really does help my channel a lot. And if you like today's episode, go ahead and click the like button down below. All right. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, just leave those in the comment section below. You never know, I may answer the questions you leave in the next episodes of our podcast. All right, guys. Again, thank you very much for joining me today. Coach RKaye here, reminding you always to never give up on your movement journey because it's never too late to move. Bye.